right? Yeah, I was 16.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Meg Duffy. I'm the program manager at Grace Hopper. To give you a little background on Grace Hopper, we started in the beginning of 2016. Full Stack Academy has been here a little bit longer, but Grace Hopper was specifically started to target the gender gap in tech. We've graduated lots of students since. Many of them are here tonight, and they're going to tell you a little bit about their experience. In terms of our curriculum, we teach a full stack JavaScript curriculum. So as a student, you'll learn how to build the front end, the interface portion that you interact with, the back end where it's storing the data, and everything in between. So by the time students graduate, they can build full-fledged apps. I'm very grateful for our panelists tonight. They're going to tell you a little bit about what they were doing before, a little bit about what they're doing now, and then we'll open it up to questions. If you're looking for the Wi-Fi, the network is full stack student, and the password is full stack with an @ sign instead of an A. So I know that's always a question that I get. Unlike most places, I will not tell you to turn your phone off. Please turn your ringer off. But you can feel free to tweet or take pictures or videos during this. If you want to tweet at us, we're on Twitter at Hopper Academy. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So to my lovely panelists, the first question I'm going to ask down the line is I'd love to hear what you were doing before you attended Grace Hopper, why you decided to come here, and what you're doing now. We're going to start with Liz.
Hi everybody, I'm Liz Phillips. Before I started Grace Hopper, I had recently graduated from grad school with my second degree in theater design. And why did I decide to go to Grace Hopper? Because I was looking for a career that was going to pay more.
Good reason.
Also, I had started dabbling in it towards the end of grad school, and I really found that I took to it, and I was getting frustrated because that's what I wanted to be doing, and I didn't have any time to do it. And then what I'm doing now, I am a full-stack engineer at a company called Fabric. It's a startup in Brooklyn that sells life insurance.
Awesome.
Hey, I'm Frida. So before Grace Hopper, I have a degree in finance. So for a little bit, I was working as a management consultant, but then right before Grace Hopper, I was really trying to transition out of business. So I was freelancing at this small co-working space for art and tech people. So I was around people who were more creative, and I really wanted to be doing what they were doing. So I started looking into boot camps, and this one happened to be really close to my apartment, and it was all women. And at that time, we had the deferred tuition model,
Which
so
still
that
exists.
was really, okay, awesome. So yeah, that was really attractive to me. Like mentally before Grace Hopper, I was also just like not feeling great about the direction of my life, and like really needed to do something about that.
Cool. I'm Allie. Before Grace Hopper, I was working in the photo operations department of ZocDoc, a healthcare startup in New York. And I had a lot of exposure to developers. I got to kind of work with them on a day-to-day basis because I was kind of manually testing, QAing tools for the photo operations department, and it kind of started my itch. I wanted to see kind of what goes on behind the curtain instead of just testing things. I wanted to actually build them. So I started dabbling in JavaScript on my own time, and I found that I really liked it, and as Liz said, I took to it. So I started researching boot camps, and that leads me as to why Grace Hopper. I really liked the curriculum. I kind of took the curriculum and went around to all the tech recruiters that I knew, and I'm like, what do you guys think about this? So it felt like a sound choice. I also really liked the all-women environment, and I really preferred the deferred tuition.
Hi, my name is Ashley. Before I started Grace Hopper, I was a web developer. I was mainly coding in HTML and CSS and like a little bit of JavaScript. I started out as an intern at this like small tech company in Brooklyn. It was like a 4-person company. We built websites for like mom and pop shops. And I did that for about 2.5 years. Like I worked my way up. I was an intern and then part-time and then full-time. And I sort of like felt like I had reached the ceiling. Like I had learned everything I could and I didn't feel like I was getting anything out of my job anymore. And I sort of wanted to take what I knew to the next level, and I had never used a front-end framework or anything like that, written any back-end code before. So I started looking at boot camps. I liked Grace Hopper because it was all JavaScript. It was, the deferred tuition model is a big plus. I went to an all-women's college, and so I knew that that's sort of what I wanted. I wanted an all-women learning environment. And yeah, that's why I chose Grace Hopper. And then currently, I am a software engineer at the New York Times on the games team.
I forgot.
That's
I'm
okay.
also a software engineer now.
Yeah, same here. I'm a full stack engineer at American Express.
I'm a front-end engineer at WeWork.
Cool. So I feel very lucky because I get to see lots of different students come through the system and the different dynamics in each cohort. What would you tell yourself when you were in the 3rd week of the program? So you're starting to get into the meat of things. How are you feeling at that point in time?
I would say this is like advice for us at 3 weeks, or just talking about generally what it felt like.
I think generally, what did you feel like, and like what would you tell yourself knowing now, looking back?
So what it felt like, it was exciting, definitely, because I was learning things that were exciting to me. I found the pace like really invigorating, but also it was pretty overwhelming, just because it's so much information at once. And I guess I would just reassure myself that like get done what you can get done, like read what you can read, and then just kind of like try to learn, but like let the information wash over you and like absorb what you can absorb and like take notes for later for other things. Like don't really like strain yourself trying to like memorize every single thing, because it's impossible.
I think for me, like the first month and like week 3 definitely, I was just so amazed and impressed by how smart everyone else was, and just like feeling really inspired that I had chosen to join Grace Hopper. And also like, yeah, just like constantly kind of having things click in my mind that hadn't clicked when I was learning by myself. We kind of started out learning more like back-end stuff, which I just didn't know very much about. So it was like, oh my gosh, I finally understand like what the internet is. I understand like what's going on. Like this is starting to make sense. And like I'm around all these great people every day. Like this is like really awesome and like a good experience.
I'd probably tell myself, don't panic. I think it is very overwhelming, especially I think by week 3 you're like, there's so much information, there's no way I'm possibly going to remember all of it. And I think the advice I would tell myself is, you won't remember all of it, but you're going to be surprised by how much you're actually absorbing and you don't realize it. And I would also say just to enjoy it, because the coding bootcamp really flew by, and there's so much happening that it goes by so fast. But you're surrounded by amazing women, and you're learning so many fun things. Like, I think most days I was waking up and I was just so excited to come and learn, despite the panic. But like, I really, really love the experience. So enjoy it and don't panic.
Yeah, I was just sort of, I think during the week 3, I was so sort of, as everybody else has said, very invigorated, and I felt like incredibly empowered. And I felt really lucky, honestly. I had gone from this job where I didn't really like it, and I felt like I wasn't learning anything every day. And then all of a sudden I was in this environment where I was surrounded by really intelligent and passionate women, and I was learning these amazing things every single day. So yeah, I just sort of, especially in the beginning, the panic hadn't quite set in for me then yet, but I just felt incredibly lucky.
Great. So over the course of being at Grace Hopper, lots of the work is very project focused. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the projects you worked on. Could be Capstone, could be another project, and just how you handled that workload at that time.
Okay, so my capstone project with my team was called Voyager, and it was a multimedia collaborative real-time collaboration travel journal app. And how we handled the workflow, our team got along really well together, so it was pretty easy to like meet every day and figure out like who should do what work. We paired a lot, like two people coding together, and we really nobody was like pushing anybody too hard or anything. We didn't work on the weekends that much. I don't know, it was very once you get to that point, it's very it's a different kind of learning because you're learning as you're building something as opposed to being told okay, this is what you're learning now. Mm-hmm. You're just putting everything together. So it's pretty cool because you're okay, I learned all these things, and you later you can put them together and you can make a thing that works. Yeah.
I heard a student describe it recently as building the plane as you fly it, which I felt was a very good visual.
Yeah, my final project, the capstone project, was also just a rush. It went by really quickly, and I think the thing with that project is it's really influenced by the people you're working with. So my team really wanted to do something kind of out there and creative, so we took a long time thinking about ideas, and I remember at first our fellow, we were also really close to our fellow, we all stayed in touch. So I think our idea for the first week was going to be this virtual masturbation tool, and it slowly became this music visualizer. It went through several iterations before we decided on what we actually made, and then it went by really fast. And we also paired, so I worked with 3 other people, so it was easy to pair up and then split the work.
Yeah, same thing. So I think the hardest part for us was deciding what to do, because I think by the time you get to that point, you're there's so much that we can actually build with what we know. So the possibilities are endless. We ended up building a dream journal that basically analyzes the text of your dream and renders a 3D model unique to each specific dream based on emotions in that dream. So there were a lot of layers to it, but we also started out, we want to do a neural map, and we definitely knew the things we wanted to do, and we just kind of used those concepts. But we also had a 3-person team that worked really well together. We didn't actually pair that much. We kind of working on our own. But I think at that point, you're so close to everyone that no matter who you end up with, you're going to gel really nicely, and everyone's going to be excited about what they're working on.
So my capstone project was a photo visualization app. So it was basically these photos layered over a map within a Voronoi diagram. It was kind of weird, but it was not my idea. Yeah, so we made that, and it was pretty easy. I mean, I got along really well with my group. I worked with 3 other people, and as far as handling work, it was really easy to just sort of split it up. I mean, there's a ton to do, so you have stand up every day, and you're okay, I'm taking care of this, and yeah, it was pretty easy to divvy it up.
I should mention that we videotape all of these tech talks, these final presentations, so you can actually find all of these wonderful projects on YouTube, which I did before this event. One thing that I wanted to touch on, because I feel like everybody spoke to the concept of pairing. So for folks who don't know, pairing is when 2 people are working on the same machine, coding at the same time. And so they're talking through the process as they're building. We have students pair throughout the program. So throughout the junior phase, the first part, you'll be working on workshops together with people. And then even in some of the senior phase work, people can choose to pair as well. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what was the biggest lesson and the biggest challenge that you experienced pairing at Grace Hopper.
So the biggest challenge and the biggest lesson, is that what you said? Okay. The biggest challenge, I think, was probably just figuring out where your personality fits in with a bunch of other personalities. because I had worked in groups before, like theater is very collaborative, but it's not usually like one-on-one. So sitting down with someone that, especially at the beginning, you don't really know who you're sitting down next to, and then figuring out like, okay, like, how do I talk to this person? Like, how do we communicate? I know that's probably the biggest challenge, is just figuring out like how to communicate with everyone. And then the biggest lesson, I really don't know.
That's okay.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing, I guess, just like one-on-one interpersonal relationships is a challenge and a lesson to figure out like who you are in relation to a lot of different other people.
Yeah, I think my biggest challenge and lesson are kind of like two sides of the same coin. It was definitely challenging to like, you know, get to know a new person, like meet someone, and also work with them to figure out something that both of you don't really know very well. So like immediately you have to figure out, you know, like who should be the person like typing, who should be the person like maybe giving the instructions, like doing the navigation. So just figuring out the cadence of that, and like also like being able to do both roles, because you don't want to be a person who's always typing or always like kind of sitting there without too much to do. Yeah, that was probably my lesson.
Yeah, I think similar to both of you guys said, I think figuring out, like you said, every day you're sitting down with someone new, and everyone has a different learning style and a different communication style, so kind of figuring out how both of you are going to do something that you don't know what you're doing. It's all new to both of you, but you both need to learn, and you both need to learn how to communicate with each other. So it's the biggest lesson, just learning how to communicate with people, and also communicating with using technical terms, because that's something that you're going to have to do at work a lot. And it's something I still do, like if I have to debug something with somebody and I'm pair programming, a lot of the skills I used here and I learned here actually help me very well at my job, because I'm debugging something with someone and I'm trying to figure out how what they're going to understand, how they communicate. So, yeah.
Yeah, everything they said is totally true. I guess, so, yes, the biggest challenge is, I think the biggest challenge is like actually making use of the pair programming, because sometimes it can feel like a chore and you can sort of get into this mindset where you're like, oh, I just don't want to do this today, I'm just not in the mood. But like really what it is a chance to, I think a sort of rare opportunity to watch and like figure out how somebody solves problems, and to like really get into somebody's brain and like be like, oh, this is how they're thinking about this problem, and this is sort of the solution that intuitively came to them, and I had a different one. And I think it's a real great opportunity to learn and to pick up things from that. So I would say that's sort of similar things, different sides of the same coin.
Nice. So I know at Grace Hopper and also at Full Stack, we frequently tell students to have systems over goals. That's something that we really try to hammer home. I'd love to hear about a system or process that you used either at Grace Hopper or in your current job that helped you become a better programmer. And we don't have to go in the same order every time. I feel like we're putting a lot of pressure on Liz to deliver right now.
I can go first. I feel like something that I learned to do at Bootcamp was just to like explain a problem to someone else, especially if I was stuck with someone and I like talked through it with someone, I would figure it out myself, like much easier what the bug was, and I do that all the time at work. Like a lot of my coworkers kind of sit in front of their computer and like whisper to themselves. It's called rubber ducking, but it's very common. It's like kind of the way to solve a problem yourself is to like try to talk through it, like actually talk.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like when you talk out loud and like really try and explain a problem to somebody, it sort of challenges what you know about the problem, and it forces you to think about it in a different way. Something else I also try and do is I also try and isolate things. So if, I don't know, something is, if I know that there's a piece of the code that is, you know, wrong or it's buggy, or I know the general area, I try and sort of, or if it's like a complex or like hairy problem, I really try and like build something that is isolated from it. and I feel like I do that a lot at my job. So.
I guess another system that I started using at Grace Hopper that also helped me at my job is because there's so many concepts being thrown at you, especially at your first job, but also at Grace Hopper. A couple of us used to have like a notebook, and every time you hear a word that you don't know, or you don't have time to look it up right then and there, you just write it down and you get home and you just look up each of those terms so that you'll kind of know them later. And I've ended up doing that at my job so many times in the first couple of months.
I would say that one of the systems that I started here that I've carried over into my job was like my system of like self-care, because I feel like it wasn't the best before I started, but there was really no room for like being too tired from stress or like things like that. So it was really like I have a bedtime. Like I personally have a really long commute to get here, so it was like I need to be in bed before 11. I am going to wake up, like I need to make sure I have a healthy lunch. So it's just like sustaining your body and your mind. And like part of that was like, no, I'm not going to stay up like so late to study, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to get up tomorrow and do the same thing. So really prioritizing, like I need to sleep, I need to eat at regular times. And not that this program discourages that, but it's like I'm given this. It doesn't. Like I'm given this like hour and a half lunch. I'm not going to sit at my desk for an hour and a half. I'm going to like get up. I'm going to go for a walk when the weather's nice. I'm going to go sit in the kitchen and talk with other people. I'm going to like, relax when it's time to relax.
I'd love to build on that because I think that's something that's very important. The curriculum is very rigorous and the program is full-time. There's so much to do. Some would say too much to do and not enough time. What other strategies did you use in the program to manage your time?
I'm a huge productivity app junkie, so it was really nice to be able to like tap into that and be like, I have my Google Calendar. I stuck to that. I would do like reminders on my phone. I did to-do lists. Like I had certain like sets of softwares that I did. I feel like also just like trying to use like every bit of time. Yeah.
I think I guess having a routine. Like I try to do kind of what Liz talked about, during lunch, while we have that lunch, that's my gym time. That's what I like to do. I come home, eat first before you do anything else, but then it's like review, whatever we were going over today, then maybe work on a workshop, but like doing kind of the same thing, getting into that flow so that you don't feel you're like, I'm doing so much, you get used to it, and then it just becomes a nice flow to it.
I feel like I just sort of, when I went home, Like I didn't do any reviewing or anything. If I wanted to review, I stayed here. But when I was home, I was like, this is just going to be my time to relax. If I'm like stepping into my apartment, that's just sort of it. I'm not thinking about coding for the rest of the night. So that was sort of my way of dealing with things.
That's good. Yeah, I like that, having that clear boundary.
I did the same thing. I never like ate lunch or dinner in front of a computer. I try to like make times like for socializing really separate from like coding.
Awesome. So I'd love to switch gears a little bit and talk about the job search after Grace Hopper. I know people are always interested about what that's like for fresh grads and what that experience entails. So I'd love to hear a little bit about just each of your searches and kind of what resources do you feel helped you succeed in that process?
So I'll start, and I will preface this by saying that this is probably not the most typical experience, although it might be more typical as the network of Grace Hopper full stack students is growing. But so I did the program. I was in 1701, so I started in January of this year. I finished the program. I did the teaching fellowship, which is an additional like 3 months with a cohort that comes right after you. And then I was gearing up to start my job search, and someone who was my teaching fellow when I was in the program, working at a company, recommended me for a position, and I interviewed there, and I loved it so much, and I was like, this is the one. So I took that job. So
Done.
I have done one interview. So I might not be the most qualified to answer this question, but it's atypical, and I wouldn't even say like recommended to just take the first job, like the first interview you get. However, I did feel super prepared for that interview. There's tools that they give you about like how to approach problems you don't know. The whole program is kind of teaching you like how to study for things that you don't know yet, because there is a lot of at the beginning like this is what we're learning, this is what you should be reading, this is what you're doing, and then you get into projects and it's like you might be using a framework or a tool that nobody here has used. So the only thing you can do is look up answers on the internet, read the documentation. So really, I felt prepared, and obviously I did well on the interview, but yeah, I think you're given like a good amount of tools if you choose to use them.
Yeah, and the person who referred Liz was on my like group project, and I know she got her job from going to the gym.
Yeah.
Someone
We should
just,
all be so lucky.
yeah, I guess they just like struck up a conversation at the gym. I guess my job search was also a little bit different because I was a fellow after I did the program. So the fellowship is a program that you can do after you graduate, and you become like a teaching assistant for the next cohort. So I had a little extra time to search for a job, and during that time I was contacting like my fellows because they had like gotten jobs, or like people in my cohort. So the first job offer I got was actually through a lead that I had from a girl who was in my cohort but didn't do the fellowship. She like turned down this job, and it was like for a blockchain company, and she knew I was interested in that, so she told me about it and they gave me an offer. But I didn't end up working there because I didn't want to work with all like bros. And so then after that, my job search was like much longer and like kind of sucky, but I felt like really confident too, because I had learned a lot and was just preparing for interviewing. And I was like in the process of interviewing already, like during the fellowship, and like had things that I was working on, but it was slow. And I found that like for larger companies, it was especially like difficult because it was just like multiple levels of interviews and then communications, so it was quite a process.
So I wasn't a fellow. I actually started my job search right after the program ended, and I think my job search lasted about a month. It was definitely a very exhausting, like condensed month, but I actually felt pretty prepared for it with the Reacto and everything we were doing. I also had like the Cracking the Coding interview book, and I was going through it. I was lucky enough to actually get 2 offers from hiring day companies, and I actually chose one of them. So I think that I was lucky enough to get an offer from hiring day, but I also know a lot of people who managed to also within a month or two, just by sending out resumes or through networks or contacts, nailed down a job in that time. But I would say my interview process was I was interviewing with companies both from hiring day and that I found on my own, but I ended up going with the hiring day one.
I was also a teaching fellow after I graduated from my cohort. My job search lasted about 3 months because it was like sort of over the holidays. Let me see. So when I initially started looking for jobs, my sort of first thought was that I wanted to apply to jobs where I really sort of cared about the product. I wanted to apply to places where I used whatever it was they were selling or they were making. And then sort of go on to AngelList or whatever it was to sort of find jobs. Let's see, I also, it helps to know other people who've gone through the program. I received my first offer from a company that somebody in my cohort ended up at. And then I sort of had another interview process, and those two sort of ended at the same time, and I ended up choosing the New York Times. Awesome.
I know one piece of advice that we give students very frequently is to have a strong online presence when they go into the job hunt. So having a strong LinkedIn, making sure that your GitHub has lots of projects, and also blogging, putting up your tech talk. What's your favorite way, and I guess what's the most authentic way that you like to build your own online portfolio?
I love Twitter. So I have a Twitter account that is probably the most authentic. I was gearing up for the job search. I was really active on LinkedIn, but I don't know how authentic anyone can be on LinkedIn. But yeah, Twitter, it's like quick. You can put out links to blog posts or whatever. I didn't end up maintaining a blog because I just felt like there was no time for that. Yeah, I did not have any time. And like keeping up my GitHub, like I made sure my GitHub was nice. I invested in trying to answer a couple questions on Stack Overflow. It's a nice way to build your presence because you get like points if people like your answers. But that can definitely be like a little difficult to get started doing. But yeah, I think Twitter was just like my quick way of doing that.
I think for me, I spent a lot of time in different Slack channels. There are so many, and like a lot of them are like specific to like different segments of tech. A really good resource that I use that I was on all the time, LGBT in Tech Slack. I think that's actually the Slack channel as well. They had a job board and like a great community. You could ask questions there, and it was a really good space. There's also like a Lesbians Who Tech Summit Tech Slack. Yeah, like it's all like different variations of like tech inclusion kind of Slack channels, but I was super active on all of those, and people on there were super helpful, and there were lots of job postings. I didn't end up actually like finding a job through that, but I know like people were more responsive.
I invested a lot in things like a LinkedIn profile. I had a Stack Overflow profile. For a while during my job search, I did feel like an actual walking LinkedIn profile because I didn't feel really authentic. But I think I definitely kind of did a little bit of all of the above. I listened in, or read a lot of Slack channels. I didn't really participate. In the end, like I said, a lot of the jobs that I found, I just searched. I like went after them on my own. I didn't really get them from any of these channels, but I did find just even on LinkedIn, kind of joining a bunch of groups, I still get these emails like just from people posting these groups now. It makes you feel like you're part of a community of people who are coding, who have jobs in it. So LinkedIn was like the biggest thing that I did, I think.
Yeah, similarly, LinkedIn was probably where I invested most of my energy because I felt like I had to. Yeah, and then I like sort of made sure that my GitHub was like up to date with all the projects that I had done while I was here. But I'm really terrible at social media, so definitely like do everything that they said.
Cool. I'd love to talk a little bit about what you're doing now and hear about more of your experiences at your companies. So I'd love to hear first a little bit about your teams, the size, how's the workflow organized, what kind of project you're working on.
So I was person number 8 at my company, so I work for a very small company. Because of that and the way that they organize, or like they made a conscious effort that just because they're hiring some less experienced devs, we're not like resigned to work doing like easy things or like stuff that we can't mess up or anything like that. Like I get to work on complicated problems. I get to write code that touches every part of our website, which at first was definitely like terrifying. That's like, wait, you trust me to like write this? And they're like, yeah, it looks good. Like go ahead and merge it to master. And I'm like, what is happening right now?
They trust me to do this?
Yeah. It's like, do you realize that like every external API call like goes through this thing that I wrote? So yeah, like I get to work on interesting and like hard problems. like I said, we're a team of 8. That includes 5 engineers out of the 8, so it's a very engineering-heavy team. We have like stand-up meetings every day, which is like a short meeting where you say what you did yesterday, what you are going to do today, and if you have any like blockers you need to meet with anyone. There's team lunch on Friday. Everybody eats together. I mean, everybody eats together most days, but this is like everyone's like getting the same food, I guess. I don't know what else. It's really great.
I think I was not employee 70, but like engineer 70 something. So like a much larger company. I don't even know how many people are in the whole company at this point because we've been growing so much. I think now we have in total like 160 some engineers and in like a bunch of different countries. But my team is about my team is 7 engineers and 2 designers and 2 product managers, and I have to say I like really love my job, and I think part of it I work on a kind of unusual team. Everyone's really good at what they do, and we have more women on my team than men, and just in general I work in a pretty like diverse environment. People are really open and close. Like we have a really nice like work-life balance. There are a lot of like company sponsored events and like outings and stuff. So that part's really good, but I still get to work on like, you know, really interesting, challenging problems, and I get like enough support, and I think really importantly, like I have enough time to work problems out on my own. But if I need help, like people are really available to help, and even though the company is like growing and changing constantly, I don't feel like I'm like super rushed ever, which has been really good.
So I don't know what employee number I am because I work at American Express and there's a lot of us. So my team is 6 engineers, 1 QA engineer, and then 2 product owners. But we're actually, the code base that we work on, 3 other teams also work on it, so it's a pretty large code base, and I think that was the biggest like shock factor for me when I started my job, was just how much code I had to kind of go through very slowly to understand. And I was actually put on a migration project, which means that I was touching code written by all of the other 3 teams. And kind of the same thing with what Liz said, like I'm touching code that's going into production. It was kind of a terrifying moment. You're like, are you sure this is okay? I'm going to triple check this. But you get used to it, and then you become more confident. The one thing that I felt really good about was we have all 4 teams reviewing every single pull request. So any changes you make to the code, a lot of people look at it. And it's also a little bit terrifying because you have a lot of people making a lot of comments on your code, but I found that I was learning so much just through those comments, because people were suggesting like really cool ways to like write something that I wrote, and I was like, I would never have thought of that. It's amazing. Or just even like cool suggestions of like what to do next time, or even like explain certain concepts to me, which was really awesome. So I definitely learned a lot just through pull requests alone, which was new. And I guess right now I'm also working on, so besides that, I'm working on a separate project for kind of all of American Express technology to use, which is really cool. And I'm also involved in a couple of DevOps related things, so I was put on a team that basically pushes the code to production, which is really cool because you get to see it from end to end, from like writing the code to actually seeing it push to production. And I'm also now getting involved with actually writing basically the QA automation scripts, which is scripts that will basically open up a browser and test the website and make sure that it's passing all the test cases. So I get to see the full flow, basically.
So my team is about 20 people, including designers and product owners, product managers, project managers, engineers also. I'm on the web team, I was the 3rd engineer. So yeah. What was the other question? It was like, what's the size of the team, and then, what are we working on?
Yeah, just what are you working on?
Okay, cool. So I'm on the games team, which means that I work on the digital crossword. We just re-platformed our whole application. It was in PHP and Backbone before, and we turned it into a full stack JavaScript app using React and Node and Express, basically everything that I learned here, which was pretty neat. And something that I'm pretty excited to be working on, so we just finished the replatform, and we're going to start building new games soon, which is pretty cool. So yeah, digital games that, maybe games that we've had in the magazine, but have never been online before, so I'm pretty pumped about that.
You just blew my mind because I currently have a 270-day streak on the New York Times crossword puzzle. I feel like a crazy person admitting that on the internet.
That's amazing.
But I'm so impressed that you are in charge of building that. I use it a lot. Please let me know if you need me to test any features.
Yes, will do.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I am just so happy listening to all of your stories because it sounds like you all genuinely love your jobs, and that sounds wonderful. I'd love to hear a little bit about, coming out of Grace Hopper and joining a team. Dynamics are always different based on the people that you're working with. I'd love to hear a little bit about how have you noticed that your work style has changed based on the group that you've been working with? You can take your time. That's a tricky one, I know.
So I feel like my work style actually hasn't changed that much because I was in an environment where I felt like I was able to make mistakes and learn and just try things out. And for the most part, I still get to do that at my job. I was expecting to have to be more formal, we use Git, and so you make Git commit messages, and I was expecting that my commits had to be really pretty and clean. And I was talking to one of the other engineers about it, and they were like, no, you can just do that. It's fine. Just, keep doing it. If someone's telling you you can't commit something, then something's wrong. Not that, that's how it works at our job. I'm sure other places can be different, but I don't feel like it's changed that much. I've definitely picked up some new tricks from my coworkers about, how to make my workflow better, but I still feel free to make mistakes. There's a couple rules I have to follow to make sure I don't break the website, but other than that, even if I did break it temporarily, I would know how to fix it. So yeah, I feel like I'm still able to just keep learning and trying things.
In terms of joining a team, for me it was really easy because I was referred by someone at the company, so someone that I wasn't super close to, but a friend of a friend. So in that sense it was easier to integrate, I guess, because I already had met some of the people, so I had visited the office before I even applied and all of this stuff. So it wasn't too much of a shock. In terms of the work, I've noticed that I'm way more focused on quality now and maintainability than on making something work and thinking longer term than short term, because the bootcamp is really short relative to your entire career as a dev.
Yeah, kind of going off of what you said, thinking about something that's going to be easy to understand, not something kind of like what we did on Code Wars where you try to make a really complicated, short answer to something. But sometimes it's better to be verbose, to actually, write it out in a way that's easier to understand because so many people are going to be looking at your code. So keeping that in mind always, which I didn't really think about in Bootcamp, because even if you're working on a capstone, there's 3 of you can just explain that code. But if you have 4 different teams using something that you wrote, it needs to be really clear. I also feel like there's just more of a process around me writing code now just because of the way it is at American Express. There's a certain, for example, before you even make a pull request, you have to run certain tests. You have to actually have a test coverage, basically how much of your code you're testing. You can't open a pull request if your test coverage falls below 90%, which means you have to write some tests. So there's definitely a checklist that I have to go through. So it's a more formalized process before I even commit any code. And also, I think maybe with just my team in particular, with the migration project, I find that I don't code just by myself. I talk to a lot of people because, especially with American Express, there's so many teams, there's so many different, basically every API is its own team, and you have to talk to a lot of different devs, and so it's just a lot of talking and trying to understand contract between these two systems and trying to figure out how something works before you even write some code. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when I was here, I just sort of was like, okay, this works. That's it. This is the first thing I've written. If it works, then I'm just gonna leave it there. And I feel like, once you're in a job where people are like reviewing your pull requests and like actually have to approve it, then you start thinking in terms of maintainability in the future, and is this clear? If it's not, I'm going to leave comments, or if I had to do something weird, I'm going to leave a little trail here so that a future developer, when they're looking at this, they know exactly what I was thinking. So it's a lot more like future-proofing.
Cool. And you've all been in the tech industry for varying degrees of time, but I'd love to hear about, like, what have you enjoyed most so far about being a dev out working in the world?
It's just fun. Like,
that's great.
Basically, I mean, you come to work and you just solve problems. That's what it is. And if you're really, even if you're enjoying coding, it's going to be like even if it's frustrating, it's an enjoyable kind of frustrating, because you're just trying to figure out how something works, or figuring out how to make something work, keeping in mind the future. But it's just puzzle solving, and it's fun. It's really genuinely fun.
It also pays really well. So
I find being in the tech industry really empowering, actually, because I was working in a field where I was trying, hoping that I could create something that would, affect someone's life. But with knowing how to be a developer, you can create something and get it online with like fewer resources, at least like fewer like immediate resources. I mean, if you want to talk about like what it took for me to get here, or like own a computer or whatever, but like fewer resources and like less turnaround time depending on what you're making, and like you can just put something out there that's a tool that anyone with internet access can look at and comment on and use, and that's incredibly empowering to me. Also just like the ratio of like, yeah, like it pays better. I have more free time, so I can actually use that money and or extra time and skills to like donate to mentor someone or create a website for a nonprofit, or like all these things that's like, oh, I wish I had the time or money to like help out or volunteer. I have that now. So just like both the skills and the environment, like my work, what's expected of me at work, allows me to be able to contribute more.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet life, I think. I just think coding is just a really wonderful combination of both problem solving and like this, like using this like logical side of your brain, but it's also really creative, because at the end of the day, like you do have this thing to show for it, and you can decide how you're solving the problem or whatever it is. So I think it's so much fun.
Awesome. So the last question I have before I'm going to open it up to the group is, what advice would you give a person who's been thinking about learning to code but is nervous about making the leap?
Do it.
Okay.
Like if you are in a place where you can take that leap, because it is a chunk of time, mm-hmm. and a chunk of future money, but like it is only 3 months. It costs about as much or less than a semester of college, depending on like where you're going. It's like it can change your life. I mean, I'm sure it's not for everyone, but I can't recommend it enough. I love this program. I love what I'm doing now. I loved being in the program so long that I stayed and was a fellow for another 3 months. I think I would really just like ask this potential person, like, what do you have to lose? If you're not happy with what you're doing now, then like try something else.
I think it really depends on your current situation. Like, if you're already working and you're fine with it, or like can tolerate it, it's nice to like feel more prepared and take more time to like learn on your own, especially if you're really disciplined. But I definitely was not very disciplined, and also like really unhappy. So it was better for me to like just decide to do it. And I wish I could have done it earlier. I think it would have made my life better, and like the transition could have happened sooner. But I think it really varies, and it is a lot of money, so that's also like another big consideration, because you can't work and do a program like this. Like, you have to be fully immersed.
Yeah, but definitely what Liz said, if you are in a position to do it, do it. Just think about what's holding you back, because I know that I didn't do it for the longest time because I thought I wasn't smart enough or I couldn't handle it, but in the end, I took the leap, and I think it was the best decision I ever did. And also, I'm someone who learns better in a classroom setting, so I knew myself. I knew I would not actually go through and learn it on my own time, go through online classes. Like, to dabble in it a little bit is one thing, but to actually go through and build out an outline for myself, that was just something that I knew myself I wasn't going to do. But this program was just better suited to my learning style.
Yeah, if you feel like excited by sort of anything that we've set up here, I feel like that's a sign enough already. Like, if you feel excited at the thought of, you know, sort of sitting in one of these chairs, learning how to code or learning this stuff, then yeah, and you have the means to do it, then definitely, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm actually going to open up with a question that we've received on Facebook Live. To my Facebook Live watchers, we have gotten a lot of great technical questions that I'm going to answer in the comments afterwards, but one of them is specifically for our panelists. And it is, being that you all took a boot camp that was on site, do you think you would have been equally as happy or successful doing a remote program?
So I actually was a teaching fellow for the remote program for full stack. So I was a teaching assistant for like a virtual program. I think it is comparable, especially if your commute is really long. I happen to live really close, so an on-site program made sense to me, and I think after making my own schedule and kind of like working freelance for a while, it was worth it for me to be around people. But I think being able to do a program remotely, you will get the same skills.
I had a few interactions with the remote program too as a fellow, and I do think that it's comparable. It's the same learning material. It's the same process. I also was doing some freelancing before I started this, and I don't know that I would have been able to keep the same, like, when I get home, it's home time kind of situation if I was also working at home. But not everyone's like that. And it's also something you can develop. Like, when I was freelancing, I was kind of able to, like, toe that line, but would be much more difficult for me personally. So I'm glad I did the on-site, but I think remote is a great choice for people who want that.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like, it always seemed to me that, I mean, it is the same. It's the same curriculum, so you're getting the same skills. But it is, I think, largely a personality thing. Like, I know that there were some people in my cohort who were just sort of exhausted by being around people all day. And so, who knows? Like, maybe, you know, the remote program would have been a better fit. But I really think it's just like sort of a personality difference.
Yeah, I mean, just judging by the capstones that we've seen come out of the remote program, they were amazing. So I'd say it's super comparable. Just personally for me, like I said, I need to physically be around people in a classroom setting. That's where I learn best. So it just depends on your learning style, I think.
And I do just want to clarify one point. So Full Stack does offer a remote program, so it's the exact same curriculum as Grace Hopper, but the only difference is those classes are co-ed in addition to being remote. Cool. Any questions from the audience? I have to walk around and give you this mic. Fantastic. Let's just pass the mic along if that works.
Hi guys. So I wanted to know more about the process of, you know, before application, what you were doing. Like, I know that there's resources on the site where I can go into like Code Academy and stuff like that. What were you guys doing specifically, and like, how was that process?
So I did like the Intro to JavaScript course on Code Academy, and I also did a lot of practice problems on CoderByte and Code Wars. And at the same time, I was also going through, just for like comp sci concepts, MIT OCW has a great Intro to Computer Science course. I think it's 6.00 SC that introduces you to a lot of concepts like recursion and just gives you a good foundation in basics. It's in Python, but it's still, you can basically do the homework in JavaScript if you feel like it.
This is before we applied to the program, right? Okay. Yeah, I think on the site somewhere, Grace Hopper links to Eloquent JavaScript, which I read the recommended number of chapters in there. I also did some Code Wars stuff. And yeah, also sort of looked up some like basic CS concepts or tried to like get a refresher in those.
I remember earlier on, there's a course that's at Harvard called Harvard CS50, and it's like free. Like you can look for CS50, and you can probably find it on some website. So I watched all of the videos for that, and tried to do some of the problem sets. So like the homework is also available for this class. So I looked through that. Eloquent JavaScript. I remember reading the recommended ones as well. That book was like maybe my first like taste of JavaScript, so it was really interesting, and it lays everything out really simply. Other than that, I hadn't like tried coding any projects on my own or anything. It was mostly just kind of self-study, watching a lot of YouTube videos.
I had some experience with like HTML and CSS, and part of the freelancing I was doing immediately before applying was like, I would say like web dev light, because I was with no JavaScript, just like HTML and CSS. And then to like prepare for applying, I did Code Wars problems. I timed myself doing them to try to like get up to taking the entrance exam. I read, I think, like one extra chapter on accident of Eloquent JavaScript. I would also say, like, I think it does lay things out in a good way, but it wasn't, like, really easy for me. I had to reread each chapter maybe, like, 5 times. What else did I do? I know a lot of people do, like, a bootcamp prep class. I guess none of us did that. Oh, I did Code Academy also. Yeah.
Hi. So you guys do a lot of pair programming at this boot camp. Did you feel comfortable when you were interviewing, talking through your entire code, like going through your GitHub, because maybe someone was doing more of the front end and things like that, like, or did you feel that that was like really robust throughout the whole boot camp, that you could talk through both front end and back end?
I know I made it my personal like goal to not just like stick on one end of the stack. So when work was being divvied up, it was like, okay, I did some front end work, I want to do some back end work also. We also kind of had a strategy with my capstone project where we wouldn't just like change tasks between the 2 pairs. Like one person would go from one pair to the other and continue working on a problem. So everyone tried to like touch a little part of every part of our project. It's also like part of prepping for the job interview to like go through and work on, like look through that code and make sure you can at least explain like a part competently front to back, explain what's happening. I also took it upon myself because I had an interview so like quickly that I went through and like cleaned up our code. Not that it was like in bad shape, but just like making it like very clear and clean and like trying to get rid of that like the things we talked about where like it works, like put it in there. So like let's write some comments. Let's like take out the stuff that actually I understand isn't working now, or things like that. So I guess the short answer is no. Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else?
I guess I also like reviewed a lot of full stack concepts for interviews, but I was looking specifically for a front end position. So almost all of my like personal projects were very front end heavy, CSS heavy, like knowing React really well, because those interviews tended to focus on those concepts more. And when I was looking for a front end position, people would ask me more specifically about my projects that way. And I didn't get asked about the back end as much. But for my current job, I remember some of my interviews did have like, it was more like full stack concepts and not like, let's look through your GitHub for like code you wrote specifically with this technology or anything.
Yeah, I definitely got to talk more about the concepts, especially when it came to backend, but I was never asked about code that I didn't write. So if we were talking about my capstone project, they would ask me about something that I specifically wrote and to explain my thought process on that. So kind of like what Liz said, I made sure that I actually had something that I wrote both from front to back so I could explain the entire flow.
Yeah, I had a similar sort of situation where, I mean, people only ask you, like, I feel like interviewers are generally aware that, you know, the capstone or whatever project it was split up, and so you didn't touch every piece of the code. But also, it's also good, like, if you are collaborating with other people and they're sort of off doing their own thing, I tried to be good about asking them sort of what they were doing so that I always had an idea of what was going on in the code base. Like maybe I didn't write all of it, but I wanted to know sort of generally how it all worked.
And actually, just to add to that, my team had a process where, for example, if two people wrote a piece of code, the other person who hadn't had anything to do with it had to review the pull request before actually merging it to master, and vice versa. So that way, whatever code was going in, we all kind of knew what was in the actual project.
I don't know if one or two of you want to speak to this, but we have a question. Have you ever felt judged at work because you came from a coding boot camp as opposed to having a CS degree?
Personally, for me, no, just because American Express has so many boot camp grads. We actually have our own Slack channel now, so that cool. So yeah, I think I was treated very equally. So.
Yeah, similar. There are other bootcamp grads at my job. Most of them are from App Academy, just because our backend is in Ruby, and that bootcamp is, you know, like a Ruby on Rails kind of course, so that makes sense. I don't think I've ever felt judged. Like, people are really supportive, but, like, I don't know, maybe this is a veiled judgment, but people are sometimes, like, surprised, like, at how competent I am, or like, you know, they're like, they've never worked with other bootcamp people and they don't really know what it is, so like, I feel like sometimes I'm like the person that they ask about, like bootcamp related questions, because some of them are interested in also like going to a bootcamp to like get different skills, so, and also, because my company just bought a bootcamp, I feel like recently, like, people at work will like ask me what I think about that.
So I would say no, I don't feel judged at work at all. Like, I got hired partially because the person who was my teaching fellow was there and had the skills to contribute. So part of what they thought is that that program was producing people with the skills that could contribute. I mean, like, I know that that stigma is out there, but I think that, especially for this program, because it is full stack and we do talk about algorithms, and, like, you can overcome that if given the chance.
So we've got time for one more question. Anybody else in here? Otherwise,
I actually have two questions.
Yes.
I want to follow up with the time.
Nope. You go ahead. A mic back there. Yes.
Anyway, hello. All right, so I have two questions. One question is, all right, so after you graduate from the program, are you mandated, like, to have a full-time over 40-hour job, or is it really, like you said, like work-friendly, family? What you mentioned?
Oh, like good work-life balance?
Yeah, work-life balance. How do each of your schedules look like during the week? Like.
So I feel like I have a pretty good work-life balance. My commute is pretty crazy, like I said, but I get to work at like 9:30-ish and can leave whenever time I got in between 9 and 10, can leave between like 5 and 6, like whenever it's like a little flexible. My boss like specifically told me one time, like, I was like, oh, I might work from home. I'm getting in on this flight really like early in the morning, and I don't want to come in. And he was like, well, just take the day off.
That's a thing you can
Yeah,
do.
exactly. I was like, okay, I'll like get in at 5 a.m. and I'll take a nap. And then he was like, no, do not. So yeah, I think my work-life balance is pretty good.
I work at a company, like WeWork has like, you know, like a really well-known office culture, and like our company's product is kind of like focused around like, you know, changing the way work is. So my like work style is, and like office like culture is really good. I can pretty much take like a break anytime to like go do an errand or like a doctor's appointment. No one's really like watching. I don't work from home frequently, but it's always an option. So with my job, like our engineering department, Wednesday is typically when you don't have meetings and you're supposed to focus on coding. So usually people on Wednesdays will just work from a different WeWork location that's like close to their house, or like we'll all decide that we like a specific restaurant and then work really close to that restaurant or something. So there's a lot of flexibility for me.
I think it's kind of, 9 to 6 is kind of the usual hours that I work. I would recommend one thing for when you're interviewing, to ask if there's on-call duty. So that's basically, you know, there's shifts that you operate on. For example, what we have is every full-time employee at American Express for my engineering team, we have shifts. So for 2 weeks, if something's like the site is down for whatever reason at any time, you kind of have to respond or look into it. And also because I'm involved with actual releases where we push new code to production, that might be happening at 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. And so once every 2 weeks, that's just a night that I might have to work late. But we do have a very generous work from home policy, and people do kind of the same thing. If they have to run errands, they'll just leave and then come back. And for the most part, it's pretty chill.
Yeah, so my job is pretty flexible too. Similarly, like my manager, if you have to run an errand or you have to work from home to get a package delivered or whatever it is, everybody's usually pretty flexible. You know, everybody else has like lives too, and they know that this stuff comes up. And yeah, and my work day is from, I get in really late, so it's like 10:30 to 6:30. But I also have a manager who comes in and he does 9 to 5 because he wants to go hang out with his kids. So everybody's like pretty flexible. As long as you come in and, you know, sort of get what you have to get done, nobody has an issue. So.
Cool. Did you ask all your questions?
I like the way you guys passed the mic to just shows the teamwork.
They're working together.
Cohesiveness. It demonstrated that a lot. All right, so the next question is, after a person graduates from Grace Hopper, say you're trying to get a job and it's going to take some time, a couple of months maybe, I don't know. Has it ever been a situation like that where it took a person some time to get work?
Sometimes it can.
When does the deferred payment kick in?
That's a good question. I can actually answer that. So the deferred payment kicks in after you get a job. It actually kicks in 30 days after your start date. And the reason that we do that is because we're not going to take money out of your pocket until you're gainfully employed and have a couple paychecks.
Is there a period after you graduate that it becomes undeferred?
There's no period in which we would call you on it. We would also keep in touch with you. So I know all these ladies have been in contact with Career Success. Our team will keep in touch with you. So if there is a problem where it seems like you're not getting interviews, they'll check in with you and kind of get to the bottom of, you know, do we need more practice with algorithms? Do we need, more practice, with like behavioral or technical interview? So they really help you with a lot of that coaching as well. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Let's give it a hand for our fantastic panelists for coming out tonight. And thanks all of you for coming. There's probably more pizza in the back, but it's probably cold. To my Facebook Live folks, I promise I'm going to get to your questions after this is over. If you're interested in learning more about the program specifics in terms of curriculum and application process, I'm actually doing an info session, I believe, on November 14th. It's going to be online, so you don't even have to show up here. You can just dial in on your computer, and you can ask questions that way. So you can find that information through our website. We'll also probably send you an email tomorrow with that info too. So thanks so much, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you for returning that mic. Turn off my mic. Thank you so much. Yes, take your well-earned swag.